Hello, everyone. Welcome to Outside the Studio. This is Tessa. I'm so honored to have this conversation today. I've been looking forward to this for a very long time. We have a very special guest on the show, Scarlett Cochran. Scarlett is an attorney, a financial expert, an entrepreneur. In her career as a lawyer, she worked on behalf of everyday Americans at government agencies, including the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, where she worked on fair lending and equity issues. Since launching One Big Happy Life, Cochran and her partner Joseph have touched the lives of millions. Good Morning America, Forbes, CNBC, Oprah, and more have featured her. So, and she's got a book out, came out in February 2023. So congratulations on that, birthing that baby, Scarlett. The book is called It's Not About the Money, A Proven Path to Building Wealth and Living the Rich Life You Deserve, which I think so many of our listeners are going to resonate with. I know I have, and I actually just downloaded the Audible book. So I think it's so helpful with topics like this to both visually consume it and also auditorily consume it. And I believe you narrate it as well. That's your voice, right?
Yeah, I do. Although it will probably sound better in the audible narration because I wasn't sick then like I am now. So I've got a little rasp right now.
It's like one of those kind of like cool rasps. Well, thank you for being here, Scarlett. We're just so honored and delighted. There's so many really salient points from the book that I want to extrapolate, pull on, unpack, embody. Gosh, I mean, I feel like I understand these concepts intellectually, like especially this idea that we need to recognize and overcome our unconscious money stories that really stop us from feeling able to reach our financial goals and live our lives with that confidence. I feel like I'm aware of them. Like I know I have these limiting beliefs around money, but it's like it stops at the intellectual level. It's like I can't seem to figure out how to put these practices. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Does this make sense? Do people say this to you often, ever?
Yeah, especially because so much of our really the conversations that we have socially in the public about money, they're laced with those same stories. So even when you recognize that, hey, I have this story, when you're hearing the story from around you, right? Seeing it on social media, seeing it on news articles, seeing it in television shows, it reinforces the story that, hey, well, actually, is this true or is it not true? Because everyone else seems to think it's true. And one way that I like to describe this is to talk about the birth of my second child, Reeves. So with my daughter, Alexis, I had an epidural. So when I had my son, I decided that I wanted to go medication free and have just a natural vaginal delivery. And so, but because I did have some complications with my daughter, I didn't want to go straight like home birth. So I found a nurse midwifery practice that partnered with a hospital. So this was George Washington Hospital. So they were very holistic and, no medication based, but you gave birth, water birth in a hospital. So perfect. So one of the first things those nurses told me was that from now on, until I gave birth, no more watching women give birth on television unless it was a holistic, positive birthing experience. Because the way that birth and birthing is depicted on television, in shows, in books, it's always this deep, traumatic, painful, screaming, angst-laced experience, especially if anyone's a Game of Thrones fan and just watched the recent oh my gosh, what is it called? House of the Dragon, the multiple traumatic births and female deaths from childbirth in those shows, definitely not midwife approved. And so the idea being that you wanted to surround yourself only with positive birthing experiences because what you surround yourself by really does impact how your birth experience goes. So my daughter, who was 14 at the time, and my husband Joseph were responsible for shutting off and muting and hiding any birth scene from me for a whole year. And so I say that because when I gave birth, it was definitely a very different experience from what I saw on television. That was not my reality. Even though I gave birth to a 10-pound, 3-ounce baby, there wasn't yelling, there wasn't screaming. It wasn't like that. And so I say all this to say that that is what we're fighting against in society, like a constant financial trauma story being imparted on us. And so it can be challenging to change your money story just because you're bombarded by that day over day. So don't feel bad at all if you're having that experience.
Yeah, thank you. Whenever I think about money, and I say this to my partner all the time, my grandma's voice is in my head. And she grew up during the Depression, and she feel like for a child of the Depression, having gone through what she went through, had a fairly healthy relationship with money. The one thing she would always say to me, and you talk about the money doesn't buy happiness myth in the book, which I'm so glad you touch on that. But her words, my grandma's words were, money doesn't buy happiness, but it sure makes things a whole lot easier. So I wonder if you would kind of talk about that money myth about it not buying happiness and how untrue that really is.
Yeah. So there is some truth to it in that money by itself is not enough for you to be a happy person. Right? Just because you are wealthy does not mean that all of the things in life are going well for you, that you don't have any problems. And so that is true. But here's what I will say. If you are wealthy and you have a lot of financial resources, that means that you have the money to help solve whatever problems you're having. If you're having mental health issues, you can hire therapists. If you feel short on time and overwhelmed, you can hire support to help you in your life. If you are worried about your physical health, you can hire a coach. You can purchase pre-prepared meals to help you take care of yourself. So money is a tool that can enhance our overall well-being if we spend it well. Conversely, if we're spending money on things that we don't actually care about, right? This is the traditional keeping up with the Joneses. So we don't really care about what car we drive, but we're buying a specific car because we think other people will think something of us. Well, that's not really going to enhance our lives because we're seeking external validation from other people. On the other hand, if you're like my husband Joseph and you really love driving peppy cars, you're a Formula One fan, and you want to invest in a car that you can take to the track, but also has some luxury features that you enjoy driving around in, well, spending on a luxury car will make sense for you and will actually bring you joy. So it's really about spending on the things that truly matter to you, but also making sure that you're not avoiding money because you think it's unimportant and it won't contribute to your happiness, because that's also not true.
Yeah, thank you. Well, this makes me think of chapter 8, where you kind of go into depth about you're kind of talking to it already, but I love having nice things, which I immediately jumped to when I saw that in the table of contents. I was like, okay, I need to read this chapter. Just the very first paragraph just really resonates with me. And if it's okay to quote, you say, what doesn't matter is what you spend the money on. This fact gets lost far too often. So many of us assume that frugality is the only way to wealth, or that there's something morally superior about pinching pennies. And then I love the questions that you go on to ask. Do any of these sound familiar to you? And then you list a few of these things, like it's not okay to spend money just because you want something. If you need something, you have to spend the least amount possible. Always be on the lookout for bargains and expenses to cut. And when I left my corporate job and started this solopreneur track, I very much was of these mindsets of I can't spend money on, things like clothes that I would normally spend money on in the corporate world, because I was like getting dressed all day. And now I spend the majority of my day in my stretchy pants or my sweatpants. Sometimes I don't even get dressed. So in my mind, I'm like, how do I rationalize spending that money on clothes when I don't really necessarily need it right now? But it feels like I'm operating from this lack mentality of I can't, and this moral compass of I shouldn't, and how can I cut these expenses? what ends up happening for me usually is it's kind of like if I were to deprive myself of certain foods, then eventually I'm going to binge on them sometime in the future. It's very similar, the process that happens for me. So I'm wondering if you have any advice around that kind of spending behavior.
Yeah. So, two parts. The first is really coming to what you value, deciding what you value. So if for you having nice clothing that you wear around the house, even if no one else sees it, is something that makes you feel good, then it's okay for you to decide that that is how you prefer to spend your money. So for me, for a long time, I never got my nails done. Truly, for over a decade, I would not go to the salon. I didn't get my nails done. And just recently this summer, I saw, what is it, an Olive and June commercial. And I'm like, oh, well, I want to start wearing nail polish. And so I started wearing nail polish. And my husband, Joseph, was like, who are you? And so, I went from not wearing nail polish to suddenly now I'm buying, it's a slippery slope, right? I'm getting the SC, I'm getting the OPI every time I go to Target. And again, I started to feel this, well, I'm not someone that buys nail polish, right? Because I had adopted that identity that I don't get my nails done, I don't buy nail polish. But then I realized, you know what? In this season of my life, I feel like wearing nail polish. I like looking at my nails. And for those of you who are watching this on video, my nails are done. This is dip powder though. That's my new thing. And I love it after a decade of not spending in this way. So even still, I had to have the conversation with myself to change my identity from I don't get my nails done to right now in this season, I'm enjoying having nail polish on my nails. And I still don't go to the salon, but I'm open to going to the salon. And so that's just the next part then. Once you accept that this is something you value, that you want to spend money on, then you put it into your spending plan. That's one of the mistakes that people make. They don't actually budget for it. And so what they end up doing is overspending and then resenting the thing that they hadn't planned to spend money on, even though it was something that they truly valued. So if you value it and you want to spend on it, put it in your spending plan, which will also include other important categories like saving and investing. So then you can see all of your financial goals taken care of. You're spending for joy, you're building your wealth, and you're also building your safety net. So it's not an either or, it's a balancing.
Yeah. I'd like to hear a little bit more about the brass tacks, the nuts and bolts of the spending plan, how to effectively budget. How, like, if you're someone like me whose income was drastically cut far more than in half, how do we still save and how do we still save, invest, and spend for joy?
Well, I like to think of your money as a pizza and like you're throwing a pizza party. And so what you had, let's say 100 people at your pizza party. And so you had 100 pizzas, right? The next time you had a pizza party, there's still the 100 people. Like you're thinking about maybe I'm still going to invite those 100 people, but I can only buy 50 pizzas. So what do? You start to make some decisions about, okay, well, 50 people can't come this time because we only have 50 pizzas. And so that's the same thing with your money, especially as entrepreneurs. And when you're making that transition from employee to entrepreneur, you may experience a paycheck cut, right? Or there will be times in business where business is booming and you're making a lot of money. And there may be times like what we're experiencing right now where there might be a bit of a constriction. And so you have to shift your priorities in terms of how much money you're taking home as the owner of the company. And so in those instances, you really, again, just go back to reassessing your priorities. And it may just be that some of the extra padding, the lifestyle spending, the optional things, those things will get cut temporarily. But that doesn't mean that everything has to get cut. And it just means that you may have to be a little bit more creative about how you go about accomplishing the end goal. So I'll give you an example. So let's say when you were working full time, you ate out often because let's say you had a commute, you worked outside of the home, so you would regularly DoorDash food when you came home every day. Well, that can easily add up to thousands of dollars. And so maybe that's the first place you look to cut. But maybe you don't want to go straight to like beans and rice and ramen, which those are staple foods in our house. I have children. They love ramen. I love a spicy ramen. We love beans and rice. Don't get me wrong. So what you might do though is go with a meal kit delivery service, which will still be maybe like $800 or so a month, but it's not thousands of dollars. So you're saving $2,000, but you're still spending more than just the coupon cutting at the grocery store, if you understand what I'm saying. So there are levels that you can scale back, and you can still make sure that you're looking for delicious home cooked meals that you really enjoy. So for example, one of our go-to meals instead of door dashing is a grilled steak, some potato, a baked potato, and some broiled veggies. That is a restaurant meal, but we just make it at home for $25 instead of eating it at a restaurant for a family of 4 and it be $125.
Yeah. Oh, so smart. I like the scaling back, because in that way it feels so much less restrictive and so much more, I guess I would say, creative and innovative. And I find that when I do find solutions like that, I'm more likely to stick with them, because it's fun and it doesn't feel like, oh, now I have to live my life, very in stark contrast to how it was before.
And it's also remembering what your priority is at this phase of your life, because in exchange for cutting back, you now have the freedom of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And you are building something that's going to get you back to where you want to go. Because that's the other thing. Wherever you are right now, this is just the beginning. You can continue to grow your income so that you're at or beyond where you were before. So it's just remembering why you made this trade-off, which is the value to you of the freedom of entrepreneurship.
I love that. Thank you for saying that. That's a good reminder. I need to write that down and put that on a sticky note all over the house, basically everywhere I look. So would you tell me about the 7 money capacities to focus on growing in order to master your money?
Yeah. So the idea behind the money capacities is to really tease out the skills that we need in order to manage our money well. Oftentimes we're told things like you need to budget or, look for deals or live below your means. But in reality, there are tangible skills that come into play when it comes to managing your money well. And so those are the 7 money capacities. So we need to be able to understand money, like at a basic level. We need to understand what money is, how it works. We need to understand the financial transactions that we're getting into, because so many of us will buy a house, buy a car, get a credit card, finance something. And so you want to make sure that you're understanding those things, because if you don't understand them, then you have no idea how they're going to impact your finances long term. We also want to get good at making financial decisions. So decision making is a skill. It's something that we can practice and learn and get better at over time. And we can even have a decision waterfall. So steps that we go through to make decisions. In fact, going beyond the book, in my program, Wealth Builder Society, I teach something called making clear decisions. So you're making decisions that feel good in the moment. You're understanding the conscious trade-offs that you're making, and you're making those trade-offs on purpose. And you're making decisions that you won't come to regret in the future. So there are ways that you can make decisions so that even if it doesn't turn out the way that you expected it to, that you still don't regret it. It's just feedback that you use to make better decisions or different decisions in the future. And so I won't go through all 7 of them, but I will say that the two that I really love for entrepreneurs are earning. So earning money is a skill. Mm-hmm. And many of us are taught how to earn money in a very specific way as an employee, and also as an employee just waiting for an employer to decide that they want to pay us a certain amount of money. And I just want to say, for anyone who maybe may not want to be an entrepreneur. Even as an employee, you can decide that you can become someone who is skilled at earning a certain amount of money in your particular industry and go out and find an employer who's willing to pay you what you deserve to be paid. But of course, as entrepreneurs, we have unlimited income potential. And so the better we get at our craft of business skills and marketing, the more money that we can make over time. So earning is a skill, which is so important because, again, we want to increase the number of pizzas at the party, but also losing money well. And this is true for everyone, but also I think especially entrepreneurs, because we make a lot of investments into ourselves, into our business, that not all of them will pay off, right? And at least not immediately, because every loss is still a lesson that you can learn from to grow from going forward. But sometimes we'll make an investment and it will take a while for us to reap those benefits. We could be years into business before an investment that we made several years ago actually starts to pay off. And so it's important that we not be so risk averse that we're not willing to take those targeted risks in business that will take us to the next level.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Do you have any thoughts on, as a fellow entrepreneur, I've heard different, I'm not sure if these are actually stats or just someone's opinion, so don't quote me on this, everyone who's listening. But I've heard in my research about this shift from as an entrepreneur to become a successful kind of like in the black business owner, it takes upwards of like 5 years of building your business. Have you heard any stats around this?
I haven't heard any stats around that. But here's the other thing that I will say, that it can go back and forth. So I think it's very possible to have years in business where things don't go the way that you expected it to, even after you've been in the black for a long time. But, I wouldn't put a timeline on how long it takes you to get to the black, because again, business, it's a skill that you're building. And for some people, they might be able to get there in just a couple of years. And for some people, it might take 6 or 7 or 8 years. And so that's okay. I think it's really important that we not set arbitrary timelines that make us feel like we are not doing it right because we're not doing it fast enough. If it's important to you, if it's something that you really desire, then it's important enough to keep working at it until you figure it out.
Yeah, that's so helpful. Thank you. I needed to hear that today.
And I mean, especially now too, again, as we're in this sort of weird place with inflation being higher than it was, and with COVID affecting things, like the world is not back to what it was before COVID. And I don't know how long it will take to get back to that point. And so this is a period of really economic upheaval, and who's to say where it goes from here? But I think that for business owners, especially if you've been in business for a few years leading up to this, that these are actually the more challenging years for any non-brick and mortar business, because obviously the COVID shutdowns were very challenging for brick and mortar. But for online businesses, the consumer sentiment that we're experiencing right now, I think will affect us for a couple of years. So if you see your business isn't growing as quickly as it was, or if you're experiencing a constriction in your business right now, just understand that it's a normal part of the business cycle. And this is the part where you learn how to thrive as a business and set your business up for success during one of the constriction periods, right? This is a skill that's going to benefit you for the rest of your life in your business.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's true. That's a really good perspective. There's a couple of things I want to make sure I touch on. And one is a follow-up to how earning money is a skill. And thinking about that in terms of, I heard you say marketing. And I think when I hear marketing, I think, okay, well, that means I have to learn how to sell myself, or at least talk about the services I'm providing and the value that they bring. And within that is this inherent value of, what do I think that's worth? And how do I talk about that value and that worth in terms of getting other people's buy-in to pay that amount of money? Um, I think there's so much in there to unpack. I guess I'm just wondering if you could dive a little bit deeper into are there any key practices to earning money as a skill that you would highlight?
Yeah. So I would say when it comes, so there's a lot to unpack there, right? Because there's the marketing piece, but then there's also the pricing of your services. And so this idea of how can I kind of make someone want to pay for this, I would say is maybe not, I would say it's an approach that can be a slippery slope, right? In terms of it feels like, oh, well, now how do I get someone to pay for this? It feels kind of heavy. It feels like we have to convince people.
Yeah.
And the way that I like to think about it is, first of all, there are people at all price points. There are people who, if the price is too low, they won't want to pay for it. There are people who, if the price is too high, they won't want to pay for it. And they have the same problems. And so you get to decide which particular market you want to aim for, right? So I like to talk about, I think Tiffany's, had a $200 paperclip. And it was a Tiffany's paperclip. And someone's buying these paperclips from Tiffany's. It wasn't me. I was not their target audience, but there is someone out there that is going to buy that paperclip. Similarly, there are people out there buying Lamborghinis. There are people out there buying BMWs. There are people out there buying Hyundais, right? I have a Hyundai. My daughter has a Hyundai. And it's all different markets. And so you just have to decide for your price point, who's the target audience, right? Lululemon sells yoga pants. Old Navy sells yoga pants. Some people buy Lululemon, some people buy Old Navy. And so it's really just positioning. Lululemon caters to a particular group of people and their specific needs. Old Navy caters to a different group of people, and you get to decide who it is you want to serve. And there's no wrong or right, but you have to know those people and what are their specific pain points. So like for me, there are a wide range of people who have financial concerns. And do I believe that everything that I teach inside of all of my teachings apply to everyone? Absolutely, because personal finance is universal. But I don't specifically target retirees. So I don't spend a lot of time talking to retirees. I also don't spend a lot of time talking to people who are fresh out of college. I'm more looking at people who are in that stage of life where you're really trying to balance a lot of things, right? You're trying to have kids, you're trying to buy the dream house, you want to have the car, you want to go on the vacations, but also you need to start investing. And that's a specific group of people who want to have it all. And so I talk to those people and I know that those people are willing to pay to solve their problem because on the other side of solving their problem is the life of their dreams, which really is priceless. And so that's how I think about pricing things. That's who I want to work with, the people who want to solve this problem. And I know that those people will be happy to pay these prices. So that's where you want to get yourself as an entrepreneur, just really thinking about the value that you bring to someone's life as you help them solve this problem.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Thank you. Okay, so I want to touch on the subject of debt. And I know you talk a little bit about, I'm not sure if redefining debt is the right word, but I guess why debt has gotten such a bad rap. Let's just unpack debt a little bit.
Yeah, it's so funny how I don't know how debt has become as vilified as it has. I mean, I could certainly point to some things historically. If we go many years back, indentured servitude was a thing. So people would have to work for you until they worked off their debt. So a lot of the people who came here to the United States, many of them were indentured servants, right? Of course, some were slaves, but I mean, specifically the people who borrowed money to come over here in exchange for working years of their life. So indentured servitude was only a couple hundred years ago, if that. And that certainly would have left a bad taste in people's mouth. This idea that someone now can require you to work for them and you can't leave and you don't have freedom because you borrowed money. And then if we go further back, you could actually be enslaved if you owed money. You could be imprisoned if you owed money. And maybe there are places still in the world where that is the case. It's not the case here in the US and Canada and most European countries. I don't think that's the case. But certainly in our collective consciousness, our memories passed down over time, those experiences certainly were unpleasant. And then, of course, you add in the fact that when you mortgage a home and you can't pay, the bank can and does take back your home, take back a car. And so those fears of losing your home, of losing your transportation, certainly will causes those feelings of negativity, especially as people experience it happening to their parents or their grandparents when they're children, and then those stories are passed down to them. And of course, we see it in television all the time. Just pay attention. Debt, losing the farm, it's the boogeyman for adults. So even the Kents, I like to say the Kents, were Clark Kent's, Superman's parents were worried constantly about losing their farm to the bank, and they have the most powerful person in the world as their child. So it is not a wonder that we all fear debt, also because we don't understand how it works. Now, I am very lucky that I became a banking and finance attorney because it really helped me understand consumer financial transactions at a different level. And so I now see it as something that we have to be aware of what we're doing when we do it, right? So when we get a mortgage on a house, we need to realize the financial responsibility that that is. And when things are difficult, the thing that needs to happen is people need to reach out to their lenders and have conversations about how can we work this out? How can we make this work? But also recognizing that sometimes life happens and sometimes you can't make it work. And sometimes you do have to let go of the property that's in your best financial interest to do it because you can't afford to keep it at this moment in time, and learning how to heal from that loss, right? Because it is a disappointing thing. It's a hard thing. And it's not something that any of us want to happen to us, but sometimes life happens and that stuff happens. So how can we forgive ourselves? How can we allow those things to be part of our human experience without judging ourselves and having it color negatively our experience of debt and finances going forward? And that's a challenging thing. So I think that's that fear is what hurts people. But once you allow yourself to go to that place, like, hey, what if I did experience this loss? How could I recover from this? How could I get back everything that I lost and more? As so many people have done in the past. Like you talked about your grandmother having grown up in the Depression, and I'm sure she experienced loss, and then they built back even after experiencing that loss. So trusting that no matter what happens, you have your own back, and you're going to do whatever it takes to create the life that you want, no matter what setbacks you experience. And you also make sure that you're using debt responsibly. You don't overextend unless you absolutely have to. And I say unless you absolutely have to, because look, you do what you have to do to put food on the table, to keep a roof on your head when times get challenging. And then again, you build back.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Oh, so interesting. So in your book, you talk about creating a 1-year spending plan and rethinking your budget. And we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but I wanted to circle back to this idea of a 1-year spending plan, and why 1 year and what that might look like.
So what I love about a 1-year spending plan is that you can truly look at your whole year at a glance and plan out your whole year at once. And it really doesn't take that long because so much of our financial lives, it's actually pretty constant, either month to month or from year to year. So you know what your electric bill typically is in July versus December. So you can plan it all out. You can decide how much debt you're going to pay off. You can decide how much you're going to save. And you can also plan for one-off things. So for example, we just moved to North Carolina from Virginia, and we registered the cars like 5 months after we moved here. And we found out that they have personal property tax here. And Joseph's car, my husband's car, is going to be $1,600 in property taxes next year. Because, like I mentioned, he's got like a fast luxury car, right? So $1,600 in property taxes. And of course, we got hit with the shock. Like, what do you mean we have to pay $1,600 a year just because he has this car? But it's one time a year. So what that means is if we don't put it in our spending plan for next year, when we know it's coming due, the month is going to come and we're going to get hit with a $1,600 tax bill, right? And, hopefully, right, if we got hit with that bill, there would just be $1,600 here there. But how do we make sure it's there? We plan for it. So we know a year from now, we're going to have to pay $1,600. So we create a little fund and create a little line item in our 1-year spending plan under the car expenses for personal property taxes. And so we put in $150 or so a month for that. And so then it's there a year from now and it's top of mind. We're not going to forget it because it only comes around once a year. It's in the spending plan. So that's the power of it. And that works for everything, including vacations, right? You want to go to Maui in July. You want to make sure you have the money for it. You want to spend $4,000 or $5,000 on Christmas in December or holidays in December. You could create a sinking fund for that and you make sure that you have it. But also when you're making trade-offs. So let's just say we just had to pay $700 for registrations, which we weren't expecting. We had to pull that from somewhere else. But now we can see, okay, how can we compensate for this? Where can we move things around so that it doesn't create this domino effect that affects the rest of our year?
Yeah. As you're talking about this, I'm starting to wonder about how you and Joseph do this budgeting. Do you do it together? Is it one of yours responsibility? Do you find that? I find that it's certainly been an evolution in my partnership over the years of budgeting, spending, because I think there's such a value statement on things that I want to spend money on and the things that my partner wants to spend money on. And oftentimes throughout the years together, they've been in stark contrast to one another. I think we've gotten to a much better place these days. But I was just wondering if you could speak to a little bit about like being in partnership when maybe only one of you does the budgeting or how to kind of get your partner to be supportive of the budgeting. And what if you have, these are like, I'm asking you a million different questions at once. Sorry. But okay. What if you have like different values in terms of where you spend your money?
Okay. So how to get your partner to support budgeting is to first sit down and talk about what you each value. I think oftentimes what I experience is that there tends to be a more thrifty partner and a more spendy partner. Maybe you're both spendy partners, but you like to spend on different things. I think Joseph and I are both spendy partners. Joseph used to be a thrifty partner. He's evolved over the course of our relationship. So now we are both kind of spendy, but we spend on different things. And the big thing there is respecting what the other person likes to spend their money on. Mm-hmm. Because so often people, especially if you've got a thrifty partner and a spendy partner, the thrifty partner just thinks about, well, here's what we could accomplish if you weren't spending so much money on eating out. And the spendy partner is like, well, I don't care about this stuff that's 20 years from now. I want to enjoy my life right now. These were truly conversations between me and Joseph when he would say, well, I want to have, he would say $14 million at retirement. And I would say to him, but why? What are you going to spend that money on? Because we're not living a $14 million retirement lifestyle now. So you want to like up our lifestyle when we're old? I don't think that makes sense. So what we had to do was first decide on our values. What do we like to spend on now? What are our priorities? What do we want our life to look like now? And then also, what do we want our lives to look like later? What are our joint future goals for our lives? And when you agree on those things, right, the joint future goals especially, then that helps moderate what you're spending now. Because now you both agree that you value being able to say, put the grandkids through college, or being able to travel around the world after you retire, or maybe retiring at 55 or something like that. You both agree. So now they're on board for the long-term goal. So then now you have to agree to, okay, what's our plan to actually get there? And how much are we both willing to spend right now on things that we enjoy? So for Joseph and I, we each have fun money accounts. That's our money. We spend on whatever we want, and we keep that separate from the household. Otherwise, so all of our money gets pooled together, and then the fun money comes out, just like our car payment comes out or our mortgage comes out.
Mhm.
So we don't have to consult each other on those things. But sometimes when we're making bigger purchases, we do come together and we have conversations. Like I wanted a tonal last year when we moved into our house because I wanted to be able to work out at home.
Yeah.
And Joseph was against the tonal because he didn't think he would get much use out of it.
Mhm.
And he instead wanted a free weight rack in the garage. So we compromised and I said, well, just do the tonal first. And once you max out the tonal, then we can look at getting a free weight set out in the garage. Because I think we're both more likely to use the tonal inside the house than go out to the garage and use a free weight system. So we got the tonal and he used it for about 6 months before he started to max out the legs. So for legs, he has maxed out the tonal. And so then we actually got a gym membership so he can swim too. But that was, you see, like that was the conversation that we had, like how we compromise. I didn't say, no, my tonal is better than your weights. I gave him a reason for why we should get the tonal first. And then if he felt the need afterwards, I agreed to get the free weights as well.
Mhm.
Right. So it wasn't either or, it was yes, both, but this one first. And then if we need to, then this one. So that's how you compromise.
Yeah. Oh man, I need to spend more time around you and learning how to that language of compromise and the ability to reason when someone has I think I get a little bit like intimidated because my husband has a very strong opinion about what is right and what is wrong. And if we disagree, I often will kind of, I don't know, shut down really isn't the right word, but it's hard for me to get my point across and for me to articulate, well, can't we at least try this first, So
yeah. And so here's what I will say. We work at this. This took weeks for us to come to this decision point. Yeah. So I think that people maybe do themselves a disservice when they think that it's just going to be roses and sunshine and they're just going to agree right off the bat with how to spend money and whether or not you need this thing. So for example, Joseph's been wanting another big dog. We have a Newfoundland and he's been wanting another bigger dog because he's upset that our Newfie is only 90 pounds. And he's had to wear me down on this second dog thing for years. And I finally agreed. So sometimes it can take a while to get our partners on board with the thing that we want. But it's just, if we want it enough, we'll keep working at it. We'll keep nudging them about it. But also sometimes we just need to be able to say, hey, this is really important to me. I know you love me and I know you want me to be happy. And I really, really want this. Can we please do this? Which though I had to do that for business things, like when I wanted to invest thousands of dollars in coaching and the business wasn't making any money and Joseph did not see the vision because he's an employee at heart. I had to tell him like, look, I know you don't see this. I know we didn't plan for this, but I really want this. This is important to me. This is a dream of mine. And I really want us to invest in this. Can you please support me in this? And hopefully he'll say yes. And if the answer is no, then you may also need to be strong enough to say, okay, I want this. So I'm going to figure out a way to afford this. So if I need to go work a second job, if I need to save up my fund money or put all of my fund money towards like the payment plan for this program, that's what I'm going to do. But I'm doing this for me. Got it? And that sometimes is the hard line we might need to take.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good, I love the reminder that it's not like, I think the key to me is it's not just a one-time conversation. This might be a multiple time conversation over the course of weeks and years. And I can so empathize and identify with what you're saying about it. Conversations like getting a second dog taking years. And and so I wholeheartedly agree. And it's such a nice, all of these things are such nice reminders that when we want something, we have to really be able to understand how to communicate that. And then what do we need to prioritize to make that thing happen? So I guess we only have a few minutes left. Like I could just talk to you all day, Scarlett. I love your insights and your wisdom. A couple more things that the next thing I want to ask you about is simplifying finances. So after we've created these money plans and things are starting to get, I don't know, a little bit more streamlined, I guess, or um, income starting to come. So after we've created that money practice, what do we do next? How do we streamline? How do we automate? How do we schedule these things?
Yeah, so in the beginning, I do recommend, well, certainly simplifying at the very least, right? So get all of your spending onto a single credit card because one place to look is far more easy to manage your money and track your spending than having 6 or 7 different credit cards that you're spending things on. So for a while, forget about optimizing your points, forget about the extra 5% or 10% discount at, Loft. Loft is one of my favorite stores, for using your Loft card. Just do the single credit card because, again, you can track your spending to make sure that you're on track. Because here's the thing about a 1 year spending plan or any spending plan: the first time you come up with a plan, it is unlikely to work 100%. Because you're going to forget about things. Things happen in life every single month. And so what you're actually getting to know is yourself and how your spending actually works, right? You have what you think you do, and then there's what you actually do. So tracking that, you want to keep things as simple as possible. I also do recommend automating from the very beginning to avoid things like late fees. So you auto draft the minimum payment on a credit card so you're never late again. You auto pay the minimum payment on your bills if you can. Right? If you have to worry about if the bill is $100 or $200 higher, that it might take your account negative, then you can't do that. You do have to be vigilant and on top of the bills so that you might need to challenge it. Because I remember back in the day when I was much younger, I got a water bill that was normally $30. It was $530. And there was no way that I was going to be able to pay an extra $500 at that time in my life. And it turns out there was a water leak, and I pushed back on the water company because the water leak was on their side, thankfully. And so thankfully, I didn't have to pay it. So you may need to have that kind of vigilance if you don't have the extra padding that can accommodate that kind of surprise. But the goal here is to start paying attention to what is actually going on with your finances. And to do that, you simplify it and you streamline and you automate as much as possible. So then you're just checking the machine to make sure that it's running smoothly and noting where it isn't. Because I guarantee you, there are going to be places where things are not what you thought they were. And so then next month, you adjust.
Yeah. Do you like it? We still just use like a pretty straightforward Excel spreadsheet for our budgeting. And I know there's all these softwares out there that, like Mint, that'll help you kind of see where you're spending, what categories you're spending in. What are your thoughts on these simple or more automated money tracking systems?
Yeah, so I love me a simple spreadsheet. There is a t-shirt that I've been wanting to get for a while. It's like, I'm a lady in the street, but a freak in the spreadsheets. It's like so good. But honestly, a simple spreadsheet with just addition and subtraction, super easy to do. And why I like that over these, pretty graphs and stuff that you might see in like a Mint or a YNAB is I find those systems to be really cumbersome. I often find that they will disconnect from this or that bank and I'm constantly reconnecting. And also, I don't like the separation that it creates between your spending and you, because it's this thing in between that aggregates everything for you. And I think in the beginning, when you're really looking to understand your money and understand where your money is going, the more hands-on that you can be, the better. But also, I also like that a simple spreadsheet you have control of and you have stored away really for the rest of your life. Sometimes I look back on my spreadsheets from 20 years ago to see how much my budget has changed, which is dramatically, because 20 years ago I was making like $25,000 a year. But also, I think that those things may add too much complexity and too much hyper optimization to your financial lives. So But at the end of the day, I want you to do what works for you. So some people love those things. Just be really cautious about trying to hyper optimize and paying attention to every single little penny. I think that that can lead to a sense of domineering, like financial control and rigidity that we don't want to have. So just be careful there.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, we have had this spreadsheet since, oh, was that like 2006? So lots of years of data that we can look back, and it is very interesting. You're right. So I do love that practice. So tell me a little bit about, I mean, I'm sure this book was born out of the years of experience you have in the financial industry, but was there any kind of like point in which you were like, oh, I have to write this book and it has to include all of these key points, or was it just kind of something that grew organically over the years?
It definitely grew organically. I think the moment I created One Big Happy Life, even the name of the company, the whole idea behind creating the company was to teach people how to intentionally create a fulfilling and happy life, because that was not something that I had ever been exposed to. In reality, the life that I have right now, no one thought was possible for me because I had my daughter as a teenager. I was 19 years old, and no one thought that I could create a fulfilling and happy life. No one told me how to go after my dreams. And so I wanted to put that information out there, and not just the rah rah go after your dreams, but like the practical nuts and bolts. So financially, how do you build wealth while also having all these other things that you want to have in your life? How do you leave a good lucrative job and become an entrepreneur and still build wealth? How do you manage your day-to-day life? Because I like to say how you live your life affects how you spend your money. So if your life is chaotic, if your routines are off the wall, then you're going to turn to your money and you're going to turn to spending. That is what everyone does. We look to money to solve our problems. So to solve your financial issues, you have to also look at your time management issues, your routines, your relationship with yourself, your relationship with your partner, your kids, your friends. So it's all interconnected. And, I just wanted to provide a no BS, but also healthy space where people could explore their financial values while also building out a holistically wonderful and fulfilling life. And so the book was just a natural extension of that. And specifically, this idea that you have to first decide what it is that you want, and then you set your money to the task of doing that work, versus what we're typically told to do, which is look at the money that you have right now and manage it. And I'm like, but you don't grow your income and your money by just looking at what you have now. You have to make plans for the future. So the book was a combination of all of that stuff.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Thank you so much, Scarlett. Is there any key takeaway you want to highlight? Anything you want to make sure really sinks in as people are listening?
I would say there's so much good stuff in the book, but it's got to be the importance of always making sure that you are saving some money and investing your money so that it can grow. It's so easy for us to focus on all of these other financial goals. And I think investing just doesn't get the priority that it should. I believe that your number one priority should be investing, because that's saving money for your future self, right? And then your second one is spending to enjoy your life now. So I like to say they're equally important. They're both ranked number one in importance, but I see so many people defer investing their money for wealth because they think they need to pay off debt first, or, because they do overindulge in lifestyle spending a bit. And I wish that we all would talk more about investing as a priority and as the thing that we celebrate for each other, versus, oh, I'm debt free. And it's like, okay, but are you financially secure? Are you financially independent? Are you on track to have the kind of wealth that you need to have to support your ideal lifestyle in retirement? Or are you going to be like half of people who retire that can't even support their current lifestyle for 5 years out of retirement? right? And we're not having those conversations. So I wish that it was more acceptable for people to say, oh my gosh, I just saved my first 100K, or I just hit 500K, or I just hit my first million, or I'm on track to have a $20 million nest egg, and that we could celebrate people for that. Because that's what we all really need to be talking about, because that's how we all end up financially secure.
Yeah, thank you. And then last question is, where can people go to find out more about you and connect with you and follow you?
So onebighappylife.com, that's our website where you can find links to the book, but also One Big Happy Life, especially on YouTube. I make YouTube videos there, typically weekly. Of course, with the book, things have slowed down because does a book take a lot of your creative energy? But now that the book's out in the world, we're back to our regular publishing schedule. And of course, One Big Happy Life on Instagram as well.
Thank you. Oh, I can't wait to follow all of that and share it with everyone. So excited. One more thing I wanted to point out about the book that I love really quickly is just like the simplicity of it in the beginning, how you define all of these financial terms for us so that we're not kind of guessing about what it actually means. So if you do pick up the book, make sure you look at that first, or like refer back to it like you would a dictionary as you're going through, so that you understand this language. It's almost like learning a foreign language, financial languages. So Scarlett, thank you so much for putting your good work into creating this book, into creating this platform, One Big Happy Life. And I'll make sure all these links get into our show notes. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's such a great conversation.
Everyone, that concludes another amazing episode of Outside the Studio. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I hope you learned something new, maybe remembered something old, maybe felt inspired to apply something to your life. You can hear my dog in the background. She's doing a little happy dance. So Daisy enjoyed it. Anyhow, I wanted to just pop in here to wrap us up to say a couple of things. Number one, I have such an amazing team that helps me put these podcasts together. Without them, I wouldn't, be able to bring these amazing conversations to you. So thank you to my producer, my director of creative services, my sound editor, my engineer, Consistency Media. Don't know what I would do without you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And the amazing creation and artistic musical genius, Drew Lovern. Thank you so much for putting together this music specifically for Outside the Studio. So unique to the show, only place you're ever going to hear it is right here. Thanks, you guys. You make my world go round. Stay well, everyone. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review, share on the socials, especially if it's a show that you think, hey, this could help somebody else. That's what this is all about, right? We're sharing information so that we're better, so that we're inspired, so that we're lifting each other up, and we're learning how to be in this world, living on this planet to the best of our ability, sharing information and inspiring one another. And that's my hope. That's my hope for the show. Take care.